Andrew Miller, Shane Black from Hook'emHeadlines.com. I feel like I've said this every day for the last few days, but busy recording week for us, for me. We have plenty of recruiting stuff to talk about. More specifically in this video, we'll be talking about Texas's newest commitment in the 2024 class. Earlier this evening, they landed a commitment from four-star humble Atascocita interior offensive lineman Nate Kibble. He's the seventh commitment to the Longhorns 2024 class. First offensive lineman to commit, and also the second commitment of the weekend. First one being Jarrett Gibson, the elite IMG Academy running back that committed yesterday morning. We're not going to talk about the Jarrett Gibson commitment too much in this video. I'd like to spend most of the time on Nate Kibble just in terms of commitments, but then we'll also take a look at just like how the official visit went and like what the needs are and trajectory is still for this 2024 class. Because we're wrapping up these two huge official visit weekends, so there's just a lot of information to unpack, and we'll continue to do so on the site in the coming days. One piece that I'll have coming here soon is a few of the bigger decision dates to watch. I think that'll be an important storyline coming up here in late June, early July, because July is going to have a lot of commitments. I can go ahead and say that now. A few of them set decision dates right now. A few of them just that like there's no way that these kids make it out of July without having a commitment in hand. But yeah, Shane, let's let's kind of take a look here. Nate Kibble, I to sum it up for me, I think he's he's big body, 6'4", 315 pounds, good body mover, good run blocker. What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, so I've said this in the past when it comes to offensive line recruiting over the past couple cycles. I'm going to trust Kyle Flood. You look at Kibble, high 3-star, low 4-star, depending on what service you go by. And we've also talked about, offensive line being a little bit down as a whole in the class of 2024. But I'm going to trust Flood here. Kibble was a guy that was offered in the fall of 2021, so that offer has been out there for a while. And yeah, big body. That Sark and Flood want big humans. He's not going to be a guy that's going to come in and start in the first, probably not even second season, but he's someone that can be developed over time and, could end up plugging his way into the lineup and being a contributor going forward. But, it's all about getting big humans moving to the SEC, and Kibble certainly fills that role. And like you mentioned at the top of the video, first offensive line commitment in the class of 2024. So, that's pretty big as well. Hopefully get the ball rolling because you got to stack as many big bodies as you possibly can.
Yeah, I think they're going to it's going to be somewhere of like a middle approach to what they did, like Kyle Flood and staff did last cycle, where it was more of a numbers game along the offensive line. You had nearly a half dozen guys they took, but one or two blue chips, a lot of long-term developmental guys. Cycle before, you had a lot of immediate impact guys, obviously Kelvin Banks, DJ Campbell, guys like that. I think Texas is going to end up pulling in some immediate impact guys in this class, or at least they're shooting for it, because you got like high 4 stars, 5 stars like Daniel Calhoun and Brandon Baker that just these insanely talented and just physically overpowering out-of-state guys. I don't think that Texas is going to land both of them, but even if they can get one of them, those are two guys that are probably capable of starting immediately if the need is there. More specifically to Kibble, so, he's an interesting case because, I did my scouting piece, as I always do when Texas gets a new commitment, and I try to dive pretty deep into their game, like, similar to how I do the YouTube videos, talking about not just their background, but also, strengths, weaknesses, overall skill set, physical tools, and really fit and projection at Texas. And for Kibble, there's not a whole lot out there. Like, there's not a whole lot of like pre-written scouting reports or anything like that, which is interesting because Texas offered him like 18 months ago. I think he was offered in like the fall of 2021. So, Texas has been after him for a while. But, I think that you did hit the nail on the head when you're talking about him being like maybe like a third year, potential starter. I think that that's a good way to describe it. I said that maybe by his second year on campus. Keep this in mind. So he's a good run blocker already. He's 6'3", 315 pounds. He's already pretty fleet of foot. watching some of his film, Atascocita is a good team. They're not going to trust him as a pull guard or like a pull tackle in run blocking as much as they do without him being fleet of foot enough in the open field to get the job done. Also, there's some pretty impressive clips of him. Here, I'll show you one. I don't know if you saw this tweet I put up earlier today. I usually just roll B-roll over this, but I feel like this one's worthy of showing. He he really can move pretty well in the open field. This one is him pass blocking, but just take a look at this here. He's number 79.
That's crazy. Yeah.
That's a lot of ground to cover.
That's fleet of foot for a human of that size.
Yeah. And, again, this is against pretty high level competition because he plays 6A Texas football. And so, before I kind of digress here, there was one more I wanted to show to kind of display another strength I think he brings to the table. I'll say that he mentioned in an interview today that he did on the On Texas Football YouTube channel that he really thinks his biggest strength, this is the only strength he named for himself. So it was interesting. He said his football IQ. And so I think this play is pretty reflective of that, where it's like his football IQ and his play recognition on the fly is pretty impressive. You can see him again, he's number 79 on this play. You can see the way that he picks up that blitzer on the outside. And, obviously that's a smaller, I'd say that looks like a smaller linebacker coming in on a delayed blitz. But, that sort of recognition and ability to get there, pick up your blocking assignment, and prevent that from being additional pressure on the quarterback, especially for a guy that projects as an interior offensive lineman at Texas, I think that's pretty impressive. And so, overall, I said a lot here of what I mentioned in my article, but, he's a guy that ultimately will, I think, project to play along the inside. I think that his impact will be felt whenever this round of kind of talented interior offensive linemen that Texas got from the 2022 class are done. If Cole Hudson and DJ Campbell ultimately develop the way we think that they can, and hell, maybe even Cam Williams, I think he's going to compete for starting reps along the interior this year too. But I think once they're done, then, and that might be by Kibble's sophomore year, at least there might be one spot open that, he might be able to push for starting reps. We don't really have any other like high blue chip or elite interior offensive linemen that are kind of up and coming. Even in the 2024 class, Calhoun and Brandon Baker are both going to be offensive tackles. Those are our top two guys that we're going after. And then there's Daniel Cruz, but he's going to be a center. So, Daniel Cruz in the 2024 class, I think he's insanely skilled too. But yeah, so I think that Kibble's an interesting case. He seems like just from reading interviews, coach interviews, things like that, he seems to be an insanely hard worker, seems to pick up different pieces and elements of the game really fast. He's already showing a lot of versatility in high school. I don't think the jump from 6A Texas high school football to the collegiate level is all that daunting compared to some of the weaker states around the country, or even let's say 4A high school football. Granted, we're going to the SEC, so it's going to be harder than making that transition as it would have been to the Big 12. So, I think that he's probably a third-year impact guy. I think that's a good target. I think run blocking is a plus. I mentioned the word body mover a lot because he is really good at finishing blocks. You can use him in a number of different ways as a run blocker. But he has to get he mentioned himself that he wants to get stronger and faster. And I think that's no more prevalent than in his ability as a pass blocker. I think, he's playing offensive tackle right now, and he's going to get moved over to the interior because he's a shorter guy with a, broader upper body. So that translates well to the interior. But I think you got to, I guess my last piece is I think you got to see him improve pad level and his hand usage as a pass blocker. So that's all I wrote. Again, as always, I'll link that up in the description below, the write-up if y'all want to see a little bit more detail on it. But I think he's intriguing.
Yeah. I mean, I would just add from a broader scope, I mean, you kind of want this for every position, but I think offensive lineman, it's heightened. You get a guy like Calhoun or Baker who has a chance to come in and compete for day one reps. And then you get some, supplementary pieces like Kibble who you can easily develop. And when you have a guy, I'll mention again, like Kyle Flood, that's developing these offensive linemen, you're in a good spot. We've heard a lot of the linemen coming out of this weekend talk about Kyle Flood and how it would be great to play and develop under him. Kibble mentioned that specifically. So I think it's good to have a nice balance. And yeah, he's someone that you mentioned could be competing in year 2, if not year 3. And I also like you kind of got a track for him. He's going to play on the interior, and he's got to work in pass pro, but at least what he needs to do is kind of on the table. And it's not like he's some sort of hybrid that you don't know where he's going to fit in. You kind of have a plan for him, and hopefully you can see that progress over a couple seasons.
Yeah, I mean, you make some very valid points. I think it's interesting too. So, like, for one thing, to speak to your Kyle Flood point, yeah, I think this is a good way I would describe it, just hearing some of the recruits talk about Kyle Flood coming out of this weekend. And, you can kind of know this just by seeing Kyle Flood recruit the last couple of years and knowing what he did at Alabama. But it seems like he's kind of got like the ability as a recruiter, like his charisma, maybe more like a Terry Joseph. But it seems like his X's and O's and how he's able to sell like his scheming ability and his player development, like more of those, I call it like a whiteboard type ability. I think that like he's also got that part more like a PK or like a Jeff Choate. And so, but you combine those two and it makes a really, really formidable recruiter in person and over the phone. Like, he stays in constant communication. This is a guy that hits the road really hard during recruiting season, doing a lot of good work. And yeah, it was impressive to hear Nate Kibble kind of describe his recruiting experience today with Kyle Flood for his official visit this weekend, saying that like he just bought in to what Kyle Flood was selling. Like he just trusts that Kyle Flood will develop him the right way, that he has a plan. He knows what it's going to be. And yeah, I mean, that's all you can ask for from a recruiter and a coordinator and coach. So one of the most important coaches on staff. But, the other thing I wanted to mention is you never know for some of these bigger, capable offensive linemen playing 6A high school football. I'm starting to get tired of the comparisons already, or like this mention, because like it's been talked about a lot. They're different prospects, obviously, but the last time Texas landed a high 3-star offensive lineman out of Atascocita, I'm sure you saw this already, or you know this already, was Samuel Cosme. The point of me saying that is that you never know. I mean, when Texas started recruiting Daniel Cruz, he was like a mid 3-star from most of the major recruiting services, and now he's a mid to high tier 4-star, depending on who you look at. And so, I think Kyle Flood's getting the guys that he likes, and I think Kibble, again, he's intriguing to me because I think he could be a starter along the interior offensive line in a couple to a few years. So, but yeah. I digress. You have anything else on Kibble?
No, I think we covered it pretty well.
Okay. Let's take a look now at how you're kind of feeling about the class as a whole and where you think it goes from here. So
yes,
yeah.
Well, yeah. So I think it's easy to get kind of drawn in to the hype around a weekend this big. Twitter's going crazy, and you get that first commitment from Jarrett Gibson on Saturday, and it's like, all right, here we go again. Like, Sark after dark, all gas, no brakes. And I'm not trying to be a pessimist at all, because I still think this is going to be a really good class. I do think that the expectations should temper a little bit, and we should not expect every single player that was in Austin this weekend to commit to the Longhorns. It seemed like a great weekend on all accounts. Back-to-back great recruiting weekends. Really, no bad words from any recruit. And it seems like everyone had a good time. And like I said, just positive accounts from the weekend. That said, Colin Simmons is going to Baton Rouge in July. He's probably going to have a damn good weekend there as well. So I would just temper the expectations. Don't expect anything to happen sooner than we thought before the weekend. I don't think much changed. We had a video, I believe, on Thursday night talking going into the weekend. And at least in my opinion, I'd like to hear your view. I don't think a ton changed. I mean, I think it was a successful weekend, but we were kind of expecting it to be a successful weekend. I think getting Gibson to put his name into the class was a great start, but he was kind of already leaning Texas regardless. So I'd be curious to get your feel on it. And again, I don't want to sound like the pessimist here because I do think that what the staff is doing is incredible, and I think we're going to end up with another really good class. But just because of sheer numbers, with the limited amount of players they're going to take, I don't know if this class is going to be able to reach that top 5 mark that Sark has got over the past 2 years.
The class ranking is going to come down to whether Texas can ultimately land. Man, you know what? I'll save that for a little bit later. Because there's something I want to do that I'm going to do like kind of a rapid fire thing here later. But yeah, I would agree that I think Texas's goal at this point should be like maybe 6 to 8 in the national class rankings. Like if you're just trying to put a number on it. Because that means that Texas would get most of their priority recruits if they were in that range. I did not expect there to be like a half dozen forecasts entered this weekend with like a good level of confidence projecting Colin Simmons to Texas. That was a huge deal.
Yeah.
Now, why that happened, I think I have a good idea. I don't know how closely you followed LSU in the news cycle this weekend. They have a lot that they're dealing with right now. I think with that said, LSU still took a hit in the eyes of like a lot of these big recruits that they have in this class. So yes, I think Colin Simmons, I'd say it's fair to say he's a Texas lean right now, but that doesn't mean we're going to get a commitment out of him in the next 2 months. I think, maybe if it's like October, Texas has a lot of momentum on the field and they get off to a good start this fall. Then I think you could see a Colin Simmons commitment, say in like October. He's moved up his timeline maybe a month or two. That's still a huge win for Texas on the recruiting trail. But by nature of Colin Simmons now being a Texas lean, him being the top target in this class, that has such a magnetic draw from some of these other guys that, are maybe more up in the air coming into these official visits. So I would say just the appeal of Colin Simmons, finding Texas as maybe his top school or the school to the top of his list now, that did change things. Broadly, though, yeah, you look at some of the other top recruits and there wasn't a ton of change. So I'm going to do this really quickly. I'm going to go through some of either the top priority recruits that were on campus the last 2 weekends, and then some of the guys that I just think are going to end up in this class for Texas. I'm just going to do a rapid fire. So Colin Simmons, I think he's destined for this class. I do think he ends up at Texas. That's one edge rusher. Yeah, because we don't have any other edges in the class yet. Terry Bussey, don't think it's happening. I think Texas made a good impression, but it still feels like OU or A&M. Kobe Black. That feels like Texas, man. I don't know if you saw what I posted earlier today. He went on IG Live this morning in a hammock, chilling out and, next to downtown Austin, putting up the hook. And I'm like, holy crap, man. That screams Austin.
Yeah. Yep.
I was like, damn. Okay. And then Dominic McKinley. I think that's a wild card. I'll be really interested to see where that goes. That's going to be a huge test for Bo Davis. Selman Bridges is another interesting one because I don't quite know how the number is going to work out. I mentioned that in our video the other day where I think we provided a lot of good detail on a lot of these guys. But Selman Bridges, man, I don't know. Maybe he ends up at like Arkansas or TCU. I can kind of see that happening where it's like, Kyle Baker, another wide receiver out of Brownsburg that I really like. He ended up at TCU on Friday. And I just really hope it's not another Quentin Johnston situation where, Texas either passed on a guy or flubbed a recruitment. In this case, they just passed on him. He goes to another spot and is just like a superstar. Granted, I guess Texas won't be playing that much anymore, but still, that could hurt. Selman Bridges, I don't know if he ends up in this class. I've taken it down from like a coin flip to like 40%, honestly. But I did find it encouraging that he was the last one left. He posted on his IG story he was with Sark watching film, like up until like late this afternoon. Gibson's in this class, Jarrett Gibson, so that's obviously a major win this weekend. Corey and Gibson, I still feel like can end up at Texas. I'm going to draw back a little bit of the hype a little bit. That like, Clemson still could land his commitment, and it wouldn't surprise me. Wardell Mack, I think he's going to end up at LSU. LSU's been pushing out some cornerback commits. I don't think that's just, I don't think that that's just, a coincidence right now. Calhoun, I would love for him to be in this class. Georgia, Texas, Alabama are going to be the three schools that comes down to. Jordan Johnson-Rebel, one guy I think is pretty much a lock for Texas. He loves it, man. I remember talking to him at, what's that? I talked to him at a 7-on-7, and man, he just was thrilled with like multiple Texas coaches. Jeff Banks, Blake Gideon, Terry Joseph, loves them all. He's got great relationships there, and he's recruiting a lot of other guys to come to Texas too already. So I think that's a good sign. Daniel Cruz, OU's been making a push. They've been making some noise here lately, but I still think he's destined for Texas. Parker Livingstone, Texas. I think that's a good candidate to watch. He's got a July 1st decision date. Makai Saina, 3 or 4-star offensive lineman, probably will be committed to Texas here in the next 2 weeks. Alex January, defensive lineman, 4-star. Man, I hope he does not end up choosing LSU. I could see that, just the numbers not working out, but I think it'll be Texas. And then from last weekend, Brandon Baker, that might be an Oregon-Texas thing. That's going to be a huge recruitment to watch. Ryan Wingo, Texas still involved here. We'll see where that goes. And the last 2 names I've got here, Aaron Hampton, Danny Okoye. Aaron Hampton, I believe it's July 7th he's making his decision. I don't know. I've got Aaron Hampton fatigue. He was the first commitment in this class, I think. First or second. I can't remember if it was Jaden Allen, I think was the first one.
Okay, yeah, I think Allen was first.
And then Aaron Hampton, and then he decommitted. Now it's Texas, Alabama. I don't know. Probably Texas. If they push, we'll see. It scares me that I've heard his name mentioned in the same breath as Ajayi Hall.
Interesting.
A lot of talent, but yeah. And then Danny Okoye. I would love for this to be an edge class highlighted by Okoye and Colin Simmons.
Yeah.
He is in the midst of a very busy visit schedule that's going to carry through the fall. I don't remember where he was at this week. He's already made an OU visit. Texas was actually the first official visit he's ever taken. So, Texas had a chance to really make a big impression there and kind of set the tone. Okay, he was at Tennessee.
Yeah, and he went LSU
a few days ago.
Yeah.
And so I think LSU is going to be a player here. I don't know how much Tennessee is going to be involved. We'll see. I have a hard time believing Tennessee is going to get this big of a talent at edge rusher from Oklahoma when you got schools like OU, Texas, LSU, and A&M pushing for them. So that's my rapid fire, though.
Yeah. I mean, no, I think that's a great portion of the video for people to go through and watch. And I would just say one thing. I mean, I mentioned it in our preview video, but Dominic McKinley was my third, most important visitor of the weekend. And by all accounts, it seemed like he had a great weekend. I think the LSU news could even play more of a factor into his decision, because there was a nugget from Inside Texas that said McKinley's mom really likes the academic aspect of Texas. And then when you have the news of LSU with, these academic sanctions, those two could play hand in hand. But yeah, going into the boot and getting a 5-star defensive tackle like McKinley would be a crazy pull and would be huge going into the SEC. And I love his game. He's a guy that could year one, make a difference.
Right. You got anything else for recruiting right now?
No, I think we covered it. I mean, I think it's a great weekend, and it's going to continue to trend upwards for the Longhorns.
Yeah, I do too. I think the month of July is going to be big. It'll also be telling because, we let this hype build, but it wasn't like, we had the floodgates open last year with Arch Manning. So you got all these guys in the class so quickly that, I mentioned this last week, especially with the defensive backs, you have to be patient because, like, yes, Texas has momentum with almost all of them right now. But like Wardell Mack is a great example of like, yeah, Texas has momentum, but like I just don't see how the numbers are going to work out. Like people have already forgotten when they're talking about defensive back numbers. I've seen this on message boards. They've forgotten that Santana Wilson is not a lot of people, but some have forgotten that Santana Wilson is in the class already.
Yeah, it's crazy how that works. It yeah. That's recruiting in a nutshell, honestly, especially when it comes to message boards and myself being someone who is patrolling the message boards as well. It's crazy how quickly that shifts, and there's always something bigger and better out there. And I mean, we mentioned Santana Wilson's a hell of a player, so
I can see him. We both shared that opinion. He could be a high 4-star by signing day. Um, yeah, well. We'll have more recruiting coverage definitely coming up this week and in the weeks to come. Like I said, the decision date piece is the one that I'm most eager to get up because it's just help organize a lot of these thoughts for next month and what the timelines could look like. As well as just I'll probably do some pieces on like who's a take and who's not right now among like maybe the high 3 stars, low 4 stars. It's become pretty open conversation right now on that, but I'll leave it at that. Anyway, yeah, I think that's all I got for Andrew Miller, Shane Black at OakhamHeadlines.com. That's pretty much it. Welcome.
welcome.